Hey everybody, I'm Maritza Barone, and this is the Things You Can't Unhear podcast. Has there ever been a moment in your life where you heard or read or were told something that you simply could not unhear? Something that caused you to make positive changes so that you could become the best version of yourself? Well, we share this show with access to inspiring and empowering humans who will motivate you to become the happiest, healthiest, kindest, and most compassionate you. Sit back, settle in, and let this be the day you hear something that simply cannot be unheard. Hello everyone, and welcome back to the podcast. I'm actually very excited to share this episode with you all because I want to talk about new topics that we can sometimes steer away from because they're not quite in the mainstream. So today I invited Greg Doyle to the show. He is a former musician who experienced a series of out-of-body events in 1999 that he calls Astral Travel, and of which completely changed his life. Greg is now a Reiki master in Brisbane, Australia. He teaches astral travel workshops and powerful meditation classes. And he's written a book called Awakening the Giant Within, which talks about his experiences in the astral world, which we'll talk about in this episode, also including his experience meeting extraterrestrials and living a 5D existence. His astral travel projections were an experience that expanded his consciousness, changed the course of his career and his life, and altered the very perception of his being at a fundamental level. This is a fascinating listen. Welcome, Greg, to Things You Can't Unhear. I'm so pumped for this chat.
Same, Maritza. Thanks for having me on. Wonderful.
Where are you joining me from?
Yes, I'm in Brisbane, in sunny Barden.
Beautiful. I was expecting you to say somewhere far away in some galaxy, but not today.
No. Well, yeah, kind of quasi there. For the interview, I'm kind of quasi there as well.
Amazing. Well, you're a former musician and you were introduced to meditation by your mum, I believe, at a young age. And at the time, you were using it just to relax. But there were a series of events and experiences that have now led you in a different direction. And I'd love you to share this story with us and this journey that you've been through to, where you are now and what you're doing.
It is kind of bizarre, isn't it? I wouldn't have picked it for myself, that's for sure, all those many years ago. So I was always into music. I studied music in Melbourne at the VCA, College of the Arts. And, I was kind of a tense guy. I was kind of, like a lot of us in that age, it's amazing, isn't it? Early 20s, you're kind of trying to do the right thing, Not really good in the institution. So I found that for music, I love music. It always came naturally to me. So, and then when you're kind of in the institution of it, it didn't really suit me. So I got pretty stressed. I remember my mum gave me a great book. It was called Relief Without Drugs by Ainsley Mears. Like kind of just pretty old-fashioned book. I think he was an Australian psychiatrist who travelled to the East and kind of brought back to the West kind of simple ideas of meditation. And for some reason that made a massive impact with me. Like I just couldn't believe how much I was holding. Like I'd be sitting on the train going into the city and I kind of would be reading a book or something and I just feel into my body how I was kind of always holding, and I became fascinated with what is that? What is that kind of holding pattern that we all have as humans, and what are we holding on to? So I really did get into it. Like I'd be really stressed and then I'd do 10 minutes meditation and then I feel really good. And it was good, but it also confounded me because I thought, well, that's a bit weird, and also with my playing, because I was playing the violin and conducting and stuff. And, I'd be playing okay, but then I'd do my meditation and I'd be playing a whole lot better, a whole lot freer. So just in terms of freeing up that potential, and got heavily into meditation. I remember getting really sick when I started meditating and it was kind of like I needed to. It was fascinating. As I said, I was a real stress head. And if we then jump to years later, I was living in Vienna because I went to Vienna to study conducting later in my 20s, and then I ended up living there for 10 years. And then that was when it started. So it was in like 20 odd years ago, 22 years ago. Yeah. So 1999 it started, and literally out of nowhere. I was not a spiritual seeker consciously at all. I never heard of astral travel. I wasn't looking for any kind of bizarro experience of meditation, not at all. It was purely for, it became a daily thing because it just felt nice to be alone with myself and be present with myself, and kind of, that sort of singular mind you get when you meditate, that feeling of just,
freedom.
Yeah. And that was it. And then one morning, I remember it was kind of just before dawn, and it was like a light coming into my forehead, and it kind of woke me up. Well, it woke me up. Well, it was weird because I was aware that my body was asleep, but my mind was fully awake. And it was also, so it was this light that came in, and I was cognizant enough to know that it wasn't the sunrise, because I was living in this tiny little mezzanine apartment that you couldn't even, like, you had to sort of squat against the wall and look out the window to see the sun. So I knew it, but I remember thinking, is it sunrise? But it can't be the sun. It was really bright white light. I became totally awake in my mind. It also flooded into my heart, so it felt really good. And often with the astral experience, you get that feeling of kind of ecstasy, or this feeling of, you just feel really good. You feel really connected. And it was like an invitation, and it said, like, do you want to come? And it was a feeling, do you want to come with me? And I thought, yeah, let's go. And there was absolutely no hesitation. And the next thing, I'm literally going down this tunnel really fast and moving all different directions. And then I remember coming out in the atmosphere of this non-human planet. All I can say, it was very modern buildings. It was incredibly real, like more real than this reality, which is something we'll get into in the talk. That's what typifies the astral experience. So I just thought, wow, what's going on? Like, it was like I was my angle of awareness was, say, about, like 30 meters up from the ground. I remember it was kind of like a deserty planet. And I just remember these really tall buildings, lots of windows and lights, and very modern shaped buildings, kind of very tall towers, but then opening up disc-like at the top of them, and lots of windows, some with lights, some not. It was like a dusk. It was a real high technology. And I remember in my mind, I remember thinking, wow, there are others. And also, I was not an ET person. I'm not really into that. I don't really watch that stuff. So it was really left field. But for me, it was the feeling I had, like this incredible feeling of heart open, kind of ecstatic connection, very hard to put into words. I remember coming back into my physical body with kind of tears of joy, thinking, well, what was that? That was really real, really bizarre, like, what's going on? But I just remember thinking, this has changed everything. This experience that I just had then changed everything. And that was the beginning.
Wow. Oh my gosh. So many questions off the back of that. I've heard people describe this experience before, not many, but I've heard a few of them on this show, particularly describe the experience. And you talked about it being a tunnel that you were following. And many of them, and I've heard you say this in quite a few of your interviews and collateral out there, is that it was similar to that film with Jodie Foster called Contact. And I went and actually watched that. It's the last scene of the movie, I believe. It's right towards the end. Yeah. And if you haven't seen that film, or if you haven't even just seen the last scene, just take a look at what that visual is, so you can picture what Greg has experienced. And so it's a black abyss, a space that's just endless, right? With blue frequency, almost like blue tunnels that are leading you through almost like a never-ending hole to another space. It's such an interesting visual to think about, because it's not something that we've ever experienced as everyday humans.
Absolutely. And it was bizarre, because it's that kind of thing of synchronicity, isn't it? Because I remember back then, like, you know, that was the day of, you know, you had a video shops with actual reel to reel. What do you call them? I forget what they call them.
Videos, VHS.
Videos, VHS. And I literally was just, you know, happening upon this store, and I saw it in the window. I thought that looks interesting, and I was just like, that scene. This was just a week after this experience. That scene, and I just couldn't believe it. That notion of a wormhole, you know. And I remember then researching, because that's what it was, and I wasn't, you know, that particular term, or I didn't really know much about it. Just it was a scientific kind of theory or something. And you know, I actually wrote to the creators of that film to find out, because it was early on in my kind of journey into discovery. I didn't know what this was all about. I didn't know if other people had experienced this. And this was 1999, so it was kind of, the internet wasn't that big then. It was not so easy to research this kind of stuff and other experiences. And I didn't know if other people were having that. But it's so curious, isn't it? I mean, that film is a great film. It's kind of a very loving film, and I think that typifies the experience in the astral as well. There's a loving energy, and that was the thing that got me the most. I thought, what is this benign energy of the cosmos that is all loving? I mean, to go from kind of zero to that was kind of just mind-blowing at the time. You know, and the very next night, like I closed my eyes and the light was back again. I wasn't even asleep, you know. It freaked me out. Like I wasn't in that kind of, because when you come from sleep, often an astral experience happens pre-dawn when you've been sleeping for hours, so you're pretty relaxed, almost quasi-comatose, I guess, the body. But the next day, like the light was just there, just going, and like I was freaking out. Like, you know, I thought I was too scared to close my eyes. It was so bizarre, that whole awakening.
Do people think you're mad when you talk about this, or do you now only attract those who believe and are curious?
You know, it's a good question. In the beginning, I thought, well, when I wrote my book about the experience, not that long ago, just in 2012, that was my fear, was that people would think I was a fruitcake. And like at the time, I didn't tell people about that. I just thought, well, this is something I'm going through. A couple of people I trusted who I knew in Vienna at the time, who were, you know, I was in a meditation, so I knew a few people. But now it's really interesting because I was concerned when I transitioned from that former life as a musician into now doing kind of Reiki, energy healing and meditation, astral stuff. I thought, gee, am I going to attract, you know, the loveliest people in the end? So but that was a thing in the back of my mind. I thought, because you do kind of shed some of the old friends, I guess. It just happens naturally. It's not just over time, you're just moving in different worlds, I suppose, you know.
Yeah. So have you astral traveled continuously since that first experience?
Kind of off and on. I had a flurry for years, like, so many experiences, and it felt almost like in the beginning that I was being hijacked. Okay.
Yeah.
I liked it, but it was confusing to kind of marry the realities. You know, these, as I said, it appeared more real than this. And so it's funny thing is, and then I saw in the astral that I'd be teaching it, then I got into teaching it and what I do. I found it's almost, now I just let it happen. I don't crave the experience as much. I still get out. Often it just happens naturally. I don't go through the same process that I did before. But I had so many over the years. I feel that, like anything, you kind of embody that. You're like, there's reasons for it. That's where I learned everything I learned. You know, that my teachers were these beings, as absolutely crazy as that sounds. So I got all my learnings from these so-called invisible worlds. But then more and more I think, well, what isn't invisible that is important? I mean, everything that is important is invisible. If you think everything that you have, everything that everyone has is really a relationship to whatever they have, to that job or that person or where they live. So it's that invisible stuff that we don't really see that is actually what is impacting your life, not the actual object per se. So I guess I've embodied that, and I still am, and that's kind of what I teach with my things. And as I said, I don't crave it so much. So not as much as I did early on, for sure. Like this first 10 years or so, dozen years, full on. Yeah.
Your curiosity would have been itching to learn more and find out more and feed yourself with that experience and that knowledge. And like you said, you feel like you were hijacked or maybe selected because you were open enough to receiving this. I think, a lot of people would freak out and not sort of follow what was happening to them and back out. But you've obviously done this for a reason. It's your purpose. It's, you're teaching people what you've experienced now, which is really powerful.
Yeah, it's true. And that is a curious thing. People often ask, why you? And sometimes I've thought that too. If I look back at the actual mechanics of it, I mean, I'd done meditation, fascinated with the mind-body connection always. Like this, also as a little kid, I was not good at falling asleep. Like I was crap at falling asleep. I'd often lie there thinking, how do you fall asleep? I just didn't, like I'd ask people, how do you fall asleep? I didn't understand. So as a kid, I was often looking at what was happening. And I would have to sing myself songs or tell myself stories was the only way I could fall asleep. I had to fall into a story. So that the whole lucid mind thing, and it would often pop up. I remember when I was, before I went to Europe, so, how many years ago was this? 30 odd years ago. I just remember also going through a big lucid dream thing in my 20s again, like when I was a teenager. I used to sleepwalk as a teenager, as a little kid, actually. I used to sleepwalk. So looking back at that time when I started also, I was questioning. I remember thinking, as a looking back now as a young man, I remember thinking, looking at the world, a bit puzzled, feeling, is that all there is? Like I just thought, okay, we do that, we get our jobs, we pursue what we're pursuing. I remember just that little question mark that was just hovering around the place. So I think one has to have an inquiring mind, is just say to be open to it. So I was obviously open to it. There's also this past life thing, and I hadn't really entertained the notion of past lives. So I obviously was quite open about this stuff because I hadn't researched any of this. I wasn't into past. I was brought up a Catholic, non-practicing from really, a kid, but I wasn't, reincarnation wasn't a topic. Then when I was actually shown this kind of stuff in the astral and shown the reality of past or, contemporary lives or whatever you want to call it, it was kind of like, I don't know, it was like all of this anxiety was lifted. Like, so the astral helped me lose this kind of weight of being human and trauma. I don't know. I can't really put into words why you lose that, but for some reason, knowing that you've been born before and that you don't really die, and then, having an astral experience, even where I experienced death in this body, it was kind of, you also lose the fear of that. So I think we carry around a tremendous amount of charge as humans, emotional charge, even from past lives. And I think what we're here to do is to actually kind of unburden ourselves of that charge and to live more in our potential. And that's what excites me, is like, what is tomorrow? Because really today is like another lifetime. And when I go to sleep tonight, it's a mini death, so this whole day in itself is like a Groundhog Day, really. You've got that whole day to maybe discover something new about yourself. And the next day, we have our ups and downs as humans, of course, but you somehow don't play into that so much with the astral experience. You kind of, after a while, that you're much more than just the ups and downs of a normal human existence.
Yeah, I suppose when you see that and have the perception of this infinite reality that we live in, we look so small and insignificant right now in these particular lifetimes that we're living. So not taking things so seriously, not getting so anxious, not getting so angry, upset, all of those emotions that are unwanted within us seem less significant, I suppose, by what you're saying. I want to know, I mean, you touched on this a little bit. I want to know from your perception now that you've been through this and you've seen what you've seen and experienced all of these things, how you view the human existence. I mean, I've asked this question to quite a few people that I've had on this show, and there are always similar answers. But it's not a linear thing. We've always been taught that it was a linear thing. In your perception, how would you explain this human existence? Why we're here? What it actually looks like?
That's a great topic, isn't it? I think we're here as humans to kind of transcend that karmic stranglehold that we find ourselves in life after lives after lives. So we're kind of moving from this conditional version of reality. So true reality, when I say it's a higher state of reality, it's everything. There's more dimension, there's more color. You can see more depth in everything. You can see around things. There's no horizon, for instance, in the astral. You can see things miles away in high definition. Like you sense what things are thinking. You sense the intention behind things. Beings, everything is telepathic. You don't misconstrue someone's comments through your filter. It's incredibly clear. Okay, and when you come back into this reality, you recognize that. I think particularly the emotional body, the human being, like I've met many beings like humans that don't have emotional bodies, and I thought they were cold-blooded, and but after a while I realized, wow, they just don't have the emotional body. I think if you look at the emotional bodies of humans, they're very triggered by things. The mass media often almost deliberately triggers that, and so we're put into this flight or fight mode. We're here to transcend that and to know what we truly are, above that condition where we're the unconditional. Long answer and not that clear, but we're in the realms of the conditional here.
Yeah, these I could just continue asking more and more questions, and as you're talking, I'm like, but what about this? What about this? Because I really want to know. I'm intrigued. I know Bo Maxwell, who I had on the show. You can go back and listen to that episode later on, but she described it like being like a web where we weave in and out of different realities and past lives and possibilities. If you could visualize it in that type of way, would you agree with that comment? Our human our existence, wouldn't even say human existence, but our soul's existence is placed in a so-called web that is huge and endless and infinite.
I would, and I think you're right, and even I think a lot of people listening would have had those experiences where they've had dreams, like repetitive dreams. They feel really real. They feel like they're long and that they're going back to a chapter of themselves. I think that, like if like this is a frequency we're living on. This is a human frequency we're on now. So the human aspects of ourselves, the 3D aspects, are in this frequency now. Also, we have dream bodies. Like often when I'm dreaming, I will have lucid dreams. And I know now that when I have a lucid dream, I used to try to control those dreams, because in the realms of karma, we're taught there's dramas, there's things to solve. We're taught that there's problems and we have to solve those problems. So what I've learned is in dreams, I don't actually solve them. I allow it to happen because it's an illusion. And I found that I feel this incredible waves of bliss. And I think, so I'm kind of wanting my dream selves to wake up. By the same token, our higher self, and often in the astral, I'll hear myself speak to myself. And I call him my higher self simply because he tends to boom through my crown chakra. He seems to know more about this reality than I know about this reality. He seems to know a lot more, and he's able to pull me into astral experiences. So that's why I call him my higher self. So I think aspects of our higher selves are pulling us through these murky waters. When I say murky, I'm not saying they're negative. It's just that we feel we are imperfect in this realm, which is at the crux of why we experience imperfection around us, we think. So the illusion thrives on this concept of imperfection. But I would totally agree. I think there's all different frequencies happening at different times. It's like a carnival, and I think once we lose the weight of this reality, we lose this kind of import of the drama. Eventually, we don't need to experience this reality anymore, unless we choose to come back for certain reasons, maybe for helping, whatever, or for guiding. So yeah, I think our role here, it sort of ties in with your earlier question. I think our role here is to kind of recognize our perfection. That's not the old-fashioned definition of perfection. The perfection that is already within us, and to see that in everybody else. And after a while, I found through all of these experiences I've had, I kind of recognize myself in everybody and everything. It's really bizarre. You kind of don't see a distinction between yourself, and the bizarrest things happen, if that's a word.
I wanted to
Um,
ask you that actually, how your perception of life changed after these experiences, and how you saw others and just life in general, how that perception
yeah,
shifted. Yeah.
I tell you, on one level, it was hilarious. I remember early on, I just literally, this guy rocked up in my stomach. I'll show you. I've got a nice version of him here. This guy, so he's called the Laughing Buddha. And I thought, why is this guy in my stomach? And I kid you not, he's in my belly. So when someone would come with me and they'd be going, oh, this is terrible. Oh, this happened. And this guy would start to laugh. And this happened early on in my astral experiences. And I think, what's going on? I feel really bad. Why am I laughing or taking this lightly, this person's drama? And I realized it was kind of also releasing the drama in them a little bit. It was kind of like, I thought, this is really weird. And I looked into this guy. His name's Buddha, Buddhai, Budai, and it's kind of the laughing Buddha. And he represents kind of not owning anything or not having any stance on anything. So I kind of, I think I lost that real, it sounds weird, but that feeling to really sympathize with people. I could empathize, but I didn't need to go into that person's drama. So if someone had like, this is terrible, blah, 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 I couldn't really feel it. And I realized, and I started feeling a bit weird. I thought, I don't really feel that. I'll say, oh, that's terrible, you poor thing. But I'm not taking it on. I don't feel that that's helping that person. And it wasn't even an intellectual decision. So I found myself more and more separate from the dramas around me in the beginning, to get back to your question. And it was really hilarious. I was even experimenting with becoming visible. I know this sounds weird, but when I was doing the things I didn't want to do, because I was still doing my music life, but often I found I was having these experiences and I'd be around very important people. And I was wanting a career as a young conductor, and I was quite ambitious and wanted everything quickly. But I was having these bizarre experiences. And I remember I'd just say what was on my mind in diplomatic situations when you shouldn't. And I'd go away going, holy crap, what did I just say to that very, very important person? I shouldn't have said. And it happened too often. It happened too often. Like really important things would come up and then they'd fall away. And I was looking at it going, okay, this is weird. My career is kind of beginning to go down the toilet. And I realized that I was helping it down the toilet. And I realized this had to happen. I became incredibly authentic and ridiculously so. It was like another entity was coming over me. It was so weird. I just say things before I even had a chance to think it, which is what I felt. But I didn't mean to say it. I didn't even say to someone, I'd say, look, I didn't mean to say that. I'd say it. I meant it, but I didn't mean to say it. And then I started to think, well, what am I? What actually am I? And it climaxed. I was still doing a bit of music. I was doing Reiki kind of on the side and not really telling people about astral stuff. But then still doing music. I didn't want to do that other stuff. I really wanted to get into consciousness. And then it kind of hit a point. And about 12 years ago or so, I was meditating and there was this like really bizarre thing happened. I had a little tweak in the back of my left brain. That's what it felt like. Not unpleasant, but it was like someone poked their finger in there. I came out to my wife and said something weird has happened, and I couldn't put a sentence together. I couldn't speak properly. It was quite dramatic. I couldn't talk to you like I am now. And I thought, what's going on here? I'd still go to work, my music work, and my colleagues were there. And I used to be very funny. Like I'm still a funny guy, but I used to be a very, very funny guy. I laughed everything off, and I just couldn't I couldn't work out the words in conversations. I would have to rehearse people's names. So that was enough. Even the names of people in my family, I would have to rehearse. So this was really weird. This was like, did I have a mini stroke? Turns out I didn't, because I did get concussion years later. And I mentioned that and they checked it. They said there's no lesions. What I found, someone who knew me and knew what I was experiencing said, okay, this is the side effects of your astral things. You're going a lot of body. I was going out of body a lot. what also happened was the narrator stopped. So in the back of my mind, there was no noise. So still to this day, there's nothing going on. So I feel kind of deliciously dumb.
Wow. No monkey
I really
mind.
mean that. There's
No
nothing there.
voices saying.
No voices.
Wow.
No. But isn't it weird that when those voices were chucked out, I also lost, at that time, the ability to string a sentence together. So we ended up going to Spain. I was able to be pretty quiet for a couple of years, and that's when I wrote my book about it. So I thought I'm going to write down, as a form of therapy, everything I've experienced, because I had to get from one end of the sentence to the other, and I had an opportunity to do that. Plus, it wasn't making much sense. And so also when that happened, though, in my old job, the old job became untenable because first I couldn't speak properly. People thought it was a bit weird. And I was starting to think I was almost invisible. It felt really weird, my body. And so people would ask me direct questions at meetings and things, and I would not respond. It was really, to watch now was so funny. So I was experimenting, like I would just not respond.
It sounds like you said before, almost like you'd been hijacked. Crazy. Totally. And, and early on, I was a little bit peeved at having these experiences because it was just so simply the other life on many levels. But I wouldn't give it up because once you see something, you can't go back. So it was like a little kitten for the first time looking at this big hedge at the front of, that's how it felt like, looking into the big, and you become addicted, and like to go into that void, often in the astral, you go into a void, which is this incredibly dark space. It's not negative. It's just beautiful. There's nothingness. And I remember hearing the Om for the first time. You actually hear like an AUM, really low. It was like an Om, not an Om, but an Om. And it was real. And I remember thinking, I got to Google that. But I remember hearing that Om, incredibly low bass male voice, and feeling it permeate me and thinking, this is incredible. I mean, what is that? Like, just, and meeting beings, and going to other planets, and we'd meditate, or beautiful temples, golden temples you'd walk into, and you just feel incredible. And it was kind of, to me, it was a very sweet hijacking because I craved these experiences, as anyone would early on. And I also made everything very confusing. So I guess over time, that was the final thing, that little touch in the back of my brain. Someone in France could have the same experience, because since I've kind of written this book on the subject, I've kind of widened my community in the world, I guess, and now doing what I do. But someone who I met at an astral workshop, and she told me she had a similar experience, and they call it left brain freeze, of course, in French. But in France, there is a thing, and she had the same kind of thing, and it just all of a sudden wiped the slate of that kind of monkey mind. So it's bizarre what happens, isn't it? So in the end, the kidnappings and everything became a good thing, but it really helped me, because I remember also once someone asked me at a workshop, they said, "Oh, your life must be really hell then, because you're having to come back in this reality." But I thought, no, it's beautiful, because this reality now is what I want, So I became quite belligerent in my old job, because I realized, looking back, because I was going through this transformation, I became belligerent, and like my old workplace became toxic, not because it was a toxic workplace, but for me, it wasn't a place to be. So I was fighting until eventually I removed myself from that place, And then everything made sense, because it just wasn't for me. So I was kind of pushed by this other world into the reality I am now, which is more congruent with me. You were
which is
shown
good.
a pathway, and you walked down it. You had actually no other choice to walk down it, obviously, and it felt good. And here you are today. I want to touch, before I talk about what you do now and how you help other people astral travel, I just want to touch on these beings, because I know my listeners will not forgive me if I don't ask this question about what these other beings were like. Were you fearful of them? What did they look like? How did they act? Tell us more.
Yeah, look, it's interesting. You've got the lower, look, not negative so much, but just the lower dimensional being. So the next frequency up from 3D is of course 4D, and you're going different. So with the astral, we can kind of go through. So there are these threshold beings, and that's what scares a lot of people off. And I think that a lot of our fairy tales, like Grimm's fairy tales, these things, they're meant to teach us. They're not meant to scare us off. So you do encounter certain beings out there. From monsters like hairy monsters to, strange looking entities, and even people that give you a bit of a fright. And after a while, when they see that you see them, and in the beginning, like I'd swear or I'd push them on it, and you just do what you do, and look, if you look at it in this reality, we have argy-bargy a little bit too. There's energy things going on. It's not so bad. I think because it's just the reality is so much more tuned in. But in terms, I think that the beings you're talking about, these higher beings, they're beautiful. So I kind of felt you just go on with it. Like even like dragons or black cats can be there at the beginning. But I remember like I'd have these incredible beings. I remember once there was like a French monk who was singing these beautiful mantras. I never forget that, like toning. And I'd just be watching this. I remember thinking, that was early on. I remember thinking, can this guy see me? Because here I am in a void with this being, very real, toning these incredible. I just knew he was a French monk, sort of medieval type of guy. I remember at the end, he just looked up at me, looked in my eyes, and was so powerful. I remember my whole body buzzing. I thought, wow, like I didn't even have to know what that means. All I know is the energy that comes through. So in an astral experience, you often feel this buzz. I'd also meet beings who were kind of alien kind of beings, like in silver bodysuits, who were guides, kind of bald, kind of hermaphroditish kind of beings who seemed to know me very well, and would sort of show me things. Even people who looked like us but weren't human. The ones I alluded to before, they're sort of a higher state of us. And then you meet these also very tall white aliens once, and that was interesting early on, where I used to go into these big ships with a lot of astral bodies, and they were interesting because they kind of recycled a lot of the karmic, a lot of the trauma, a lot of the what would you call it, unconscious trauma of humanity, and they liked the fact that we had that, and they kind of, it looks a bit nasty, but it wasn't so much like that. All these beings assist us in getting to know who we are. And I remember I'd hear these frequencies, so they sounded like screeching jets. So I'd wake up, so I'd be asleep, then I'd hear the frequency of like this screeching jet, and I would go out to it. And I stopped after a while. I mean, I kind of learned all I could there, but it was interesting because I saw a lot of these other astral bodies going out, and so what is it, also these guides, I met these two. There was a woman, a blonde woman, and this younger guy. I remember in his 30s, she would have been in her 40s early on, and they would constantly confront me, and they said they were my guides. I remember thinking sort of the astral version of bullshit, like, because I was not a new age, I was not into this, like I was being hijacked early on. I really thought, what's going on here? And they were telling me that how they introduced themselves to me is that they'd tell me about myself in a very constant setting. I remember this was like a medieval inn, like a pub kind of situation, wood and stone, very beautiful. And they just and they'd be looking at me, telling me all about myself and my character, and it was quite confronting. I remember this woman showed me also in this beautiful field about auras and chakras and stuff like this, which I'd never really paid attention to. I'd heard of aura, but I hadn't heard of chakra. So she was showing me the energy field, and it was so beautiful. I remember this beautiful grass, and it was like a beautiful setting sun, and because I'm in the astral. So what I found helped me stay in the astral is often someone would be telling me something really important, but I would focus on, so I could stay there and not get too freaked out, because it's so in your face when you've got beings who are more real than this reality. Like, what I mean by that is you sense more of them than we do with, you kind of, your sixth sense, I guess, is activated. Yeah. So I remember this woman telling me this stuff. I remember looking around. I still, to this day, all the astral experiences are kind of etched in a memory that's much more profound or more sticky. And I remember thinking, wow, this is just bizarre. Plus I was heightened. I remember I was insulting her, making comments about her. And I just thought, well, because what's going on? I remember that was a point. I was a fair way in. I'd had a few experiences, but that was the point where I felt I had to either own this experience, not be a victim to it, either own it or get out. So I started insulting her big time. And she looked at me and smiled. I don't think it was a very loving smile. There was no reaction, like in a dream. If you have a lucid dream, it's very different. There's more reaction going on. She just looked at me and she said, Greg, we've been watching you for some time. Why are you so sad? And I came back to my body thinking, why am I so sad? And it was kind of like, okay, this is a spiritual thing. This is something, this is not just a phenomenon. This is a spiritual thing aimed at me. One classic being I met, and this was also pivotal. I was being confronted by, you get certain energies out there that it's a bit confronting and they're scaring you a little bit. And you think, what do I do about this? I was taken out of body and I was in the void night after night, same being confronted me. She was like, it was a kind of a Medusa-ish character, really scary face. A face that was crawling, eyes that were crawling, hair like, eels and worms and snakes, really. And like the skin, when I looked at it, it was like maggots. Everything was like, it was pure evil. And that was a feeling I had. I remember being really scared and thought, okay, I'm reaching a threshold here. Because I was often just playing around the astral, pulling people out of body, seeing what I could do, maybe give someone a bit of a shock to see how much you can interact with humans in the astral. I was kind of getting my astral legs and my astral wings, if you know what I mean. I was just getting used to being out there, tuning in my skills. This being was opposite me in the astral, hovering in the void, and she was throwing balls. I remember the first time she threw this ball of energy, hit my left shoulder. I woke up in a bit of pain. And I thought, that's weird. That actually hurt. What do I do? And each night I couldn't escape this. Every time I fell asleep, I was confronted by her, right? Went on for a few nights, and this was my turning point, really was the turning point. I thought, okay, perhaps I'm going mad. This is before I wrote my book. This was just before I'd had the left brain freeze. And I thought, am I going mad? Do I need help? Do I just keep going? I thought the latter. I'll just keep going, and that was probably the adventurous thing of me. I like a bit of adventure. So and then I remember I was able to also get these balls, and someone said it sounds like Buffy the Dragon Slayer, or whatever. And I remember saying, this is later on. I said, I never watched these Buffy shows. I don't know about that, but it was like the balls of energy. And I remember I was able to intercept her energy balls, and that was a pivotal moment for me. I was able to defend myself. I couldn't hit her, but I could stop myself being hit, and I had to because it was hurting. So that was full on. And then I remember she spoke my name for the first time. And in the astral, beings do speak your name. They know your name. And she said, wow, Greg, you're getting good at the whole defending thing, huh? And I thought, okay, she speaks the defending thing. What does that mean? And the next thing, she's in front of me. And I remember thinking I was going to pass out in the astral because the stench also, the astral, you smell literally like a dog. your sense of smell is very good. So it was putrid. It was, if you could personify and put into the scent of evil, that's how I felt it was. That was what I was going through. I was really scared. And so she was right in front of me, and I thought, okay, here we go. Now, it wasn't a conscious thing, and often in the astral, it's not a verbal conscious reaction you have. It was literally the heart chakra. So my heart opened. I felt this, because in the astral body, your chakras are real, whereas in the physical body, it aligns with your endocrine system and your organs, and that's the energy centers. But the actual chakras are actual wheels of vortexes of energy that you can see. So this heart chakra opened up, and I felt a phenomenal wave of empathy for this creature. Then she turned to absolute radiance. Her face changed, and she looked absolutely beautiful. And it was this inner glow, and she just said, you see, Greg, it's all the same.
Mm.
And it's quite cryptic. It's quite cryptic. It's not as verbal as we would script in 3D. But I came back and I just knew in my body that there's no such thing as evil. It's all the face of the light seen through our own shadow.
Mm.
I knew it. I knew it. I knew it. Ever since then, I just haven't been hassled like that again. So, you know, there are these beautiful, these lower threshold beings. You know, occasionally I see them and they see me, see them, and they nick off pretty quick. So it's like they I think they're used to interacting with humans that don't really see them so much. Everyone's kind of a bit drunk out there. But if you have a singular, or your mind is, you know, it's a question of level of awareness. If you have that level of awareness in the astral, if you can take your full level of awareness with you, that's really what astral travel is. We are all like this web, as you said before, living in the astral, doing stuff. But if you can be there with volition, with, you know, consciousness, it gets pretty fun and pretty interesting. So that's really what I teach with astral travel, is to be there with volition, you know, with that in. So that was so cool to see that transformation and that deep knowingness. And it came through an unconscious letting go of my heart. It was like, I guess, this empathy for all situations. And you know, and people talk about, oh yes, but what about these terrible people who've lived in history? You know, aren't they terrible people? And I go, well, I don't know them. What they did was terrible, but in the end, everybody, it's a karmic world that they became that way because of certain reasons. And in the realm of unconditioned, these higher realms, there's just love. You know, that is the default. It's not a choice. There is only that. So even this perception of evil is actually the face of light seen through our own shadows. So it's not, people talk about, yes, but there's the fight. Well, that's in duality, there's the fight. But in reality, there is no fight.
Mm.
In reality, yeah.
Hard for us to, of course, get our minds around when it's all been, you know, a different way of explained to us through our entire lives. But you did say it was actually fun being there and listening to you. I'm just like fascinated and interested. And the word, it's like the word fun kept coming up in my head too. It actually sounds like a fun, enjoyable experience that you've been having. And now people come to you for you to teach them how to astral travel. And I want to know how you do that, because based on what you're saying now, you usually astral travel through sleeping. You access it through dream states. Is that how you get your clients to access the astral travel?
Yeah, it's almost, you can do it through dream states. I mean, you can do it from being asleep, or you can do it from actually when you become conscious in a dream. So when you generally, what happened before dawn, because that's kind of when they say the veil is the thinnest. So I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
So often what will happen is you do these exercises, like, you know, really relaxing the body and mind. I mean, pivotal to the whole thing is being able to relax your body with your mind aware. That's pivotal. And I mean, as a kid, I was always so conscious of what's going on with the mind and body, you know, because we tend to fall into stories. Like when you fall asleep, if you analyze your mind, we tend to fall into these stories. We fracture into characters. We lose kind of our identity a little bit. So kind of almost counterintuitively, you want to retain who you are. Like, so you constantly bring yourself back to wake, like when you're almost falling asleep, to recognize the symptoms, bring yourself back to, no, I'm Greg. I'm in bed. This is my room. Okay, that's where I am. So every time you fall asleep, I call that sleep fishing. That's one exercise where you bring yourself back and you kind of focus toward the third eye with your eyeballs, and that keeps you from falling asleep. That's an interesting one. So you're doing these exercises generally so that you wake up in mind but not body before dawn. You wake up in mind but not body, and you know that you're asleep, but your body starts to buzz. But you also can leave from an actual dream, as you were saying, and that's a really good way of doing it. I found that lucid dreams are like programs. So as humans, we're set up to win, right? We're set up to gain more awareness of what we are. So in a dream situation, generally there'll be something in a dream. If you become lucid in a dream, there'll be something in that dream that is particularly lucid, like a person who's looking at you, or an object, or a painting. Because dreams are pretty, if you look at them from a lucid perspective, when you become lucid in a dream, they're kind of not as real as this reality. They're a bit sketchy. Some things aren't very logical, but you look around in the dreamscape, look for something that is particularly real. You fixate on that object and you focus through it. So you focus on it and you find yourself taken through the object into another reality. And then you're in a real, like an astral reality. So it's like we have these portals that are positioned in the lucid dreamer's dream. So it ties back to what I was saying before. We're kind of drawing ourselves through these murky states of being, because it is kind of fun to recognize ourselves in that. So it's like we're in a rip. Okay, we put ourselves in a rip. If we put 3D as like being a rip, but after a while we get to know how that rip works. Because if we're constantly swimming against the rip, we're going to lose our energy. So to constantly fight against that, or even a river will go down a landscape, and if there's a huge rock there, generally it will go around that rock and it will find its way to the sea eventually, but it will kind of meander. So we're kind of programmed to actually win, but in the way, it can take lifetimes. We can do it when we want to do it, So you're looking in the dream for something that is kind of looking at you in many ways, like a painting. Like I remember one classic one was the first time I realized this. I was in a lucid dream and I saw this incredible painting on the wall, beautiful vivid reds, and I remember thinking, that's a bit weird. That's weird. And I looked at it and I just went whoosh through the painting. And then all of a sudden I'm in this room. I look at my hands and I'm Chinese and I've got really long fingernails and I'm in like this dormitory of all these other monks and I'm barking orders in Chinese, like really, but it's really old, like it's all dusty and very ancient in this monastery. But I'm hearing myself speak Chinese. It's so real, as you say, like parallel worlds in the web. Yeah. And I have no idea what I'm saying, but I'm in this body. Like, it's just the most bizarre. And that was the first time
that's I thought, where the fun comes in.
Totally.
Who needs to watch films anymore? This is our own reality that we get to experience.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah. Greg, you are fascinating. Obviously, everything you've experienced is fascinating. And the fact that you're helping others experience it too is very exciting for many. So if you want to learn more, then you can just, Greg, tell us where your website is and how people can find you.
Yeah, just go to gregdoyleastral.com. gregdoyleastral.com, and there's all stuff there. So
yeah, there's plenty there. I've been reading up about you for days, and I think we could probably keep talking for another hour. It's just like an endless pit of discussion. It's so fascinating. But thank you so much for your time today, and I'm sure many of us are going to be digging in deeper to find out more about astral travel and seeking the experience for ourselves.
Oh, thanks, Maritza. I've loved it. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to the show. What did you think? And what did you feel? Let us know by leaving me a message on the Things You Can't Unhear Instagram community page. And if you can, give us some ratings love on your favourite listening platform.